kiss for you.
So there's obviously been a lot of discussion on this recent Apple event of the MacBook Neo, its price point, its disruptive nature, and the pros and cons of this take from Apple, right? And there's also been some discussion on things like the new MacBook Air, introducing the M5 chip at a very good starting price when before the lowest you could get that chip at was $1,600, right? So those two things were pretty big, having a top-of-the-line processor at a substantial discount compared to what it was before, and then having a completely new viable $600 or $500 option in this space is very cool. However, you may have noticed in those things there is something that was not talked about. That is, I think, kind of importantly, they also updated the Mac Pro with the M5 Pro and M5 Max. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe M5 Pro and M5 Max were available before this. So this is the first time that you're seeing these processors here. Now, why is the title of the video, what is Apple doing with the MacBook Pro? Why are we talking about this? Well, it was not long ago where frequently in the discussion of, let's say, the 2019 MacBook Pro, you would have a lot of reviews, a lot of articles, a lot of discussion around the flagship laptop. And this was not just an Apple thing. You also had this for the relevant at the time Dell XPS from 2019, right? When the 9th gen Intel came around. I believe this is also when they swapped the camera, because the previous model had a camera on the bottom here, so they had swapped that. They had redesigned some things here. Both flagship models of laptops from both Apple and Dell and various other ones were being compared against each other and competing in that space, right? You also had a similar thing in 2020. This is when they revised the model a little bit, right? Gave it a more RAM starting and a bigger SSD starting. And then 2021 obviously is when they had the major redesign, adding HDMI, potential extension for Ethernet, I believe, attached to the charger, redesigning the screen, mini LED, having the notch there, right? That was a big redesign. And so you look at this and you look at all the discussion that it was created, especially the introduction of the Touch Bar in 2018, and then when they replaced the keyboard from Butterfly to Magic Keyboard, right? What I'm trying to get at here is there has been a lot of talk and a lot of news coverage on historically Apple's Pro series because of the things they've been changing and doing and affecting, right? However, this new one where you do get two brand new chips on a relatively new hardware, right? This kind of more rounded design is also relatively new. There has been a lot less discussion. In fact, I would argue there has been no discussion on that. And that is kind of what I want to look at and what I want to talk about. If you go and buy it, the previous model M5 here, let's just do this. The M5 is $1,700. Now that is more expensive than the $1,600 that it was originally, but you do, I believe, get 1 terabyte of storage. You get 16 gigs of RAM, which is what it was before, but you get 1 terabyte of storage, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was double, if not triple, what it was before, because I think the base models for the 2024 were 256 gig, and then the upgraded ones for 17 or 1800 were 512 gigs. So this is an upgrade across the board, no matter what config you got, of a terabyte of storage that I believe would cost you an extra $400 on the previous model, right? So ostensibly speaking, this is the same price. Now, obviously, if you go up to the M5 Pro chip, that's an increase of $500, right? So it's an extensive amount extra, and obviously you can upgrade it even harder to an 18-core CPU and GPU for $200 more on top of that. So now we're looking at $2,200, we're looking at $2,400, right? And even more if you go to the 16-inch model, which is getting up to $2,700 now. But overall, you might think that, okay, well, a reason that people aren't talking about the MacBook Pro as much is because of look at these prices, right? Look how expensive everything is. And I would agree with you, for the most part, that yes, when the focus of the reason the focus of the previous thing is on the new stuff is because the new stuff is cheaper and people are trying to afford things, and so having it be cheaper is good. But that hasn't stopped companies and coverage from existing for the expensive stuff, right? Even when stuff like the redesign here in 2021 was, I believe, starting at $2,000. When they had the redesign, they brought back MagSafe, they had HDMI, they had Ethernet on the thing, they redesigned the screen, they improved the speakers and camera and whatnot. That was $2,000 starting. and there wasn't complaints or concerns about the price. It was just like, this is a new thing, it's trying something, it has a really good these kind of features, and this is the price. And there wasn't as much of a concern for the viability of it in the market, as well as, like the price didn't affect the coverage, right? However, if the argument here is that because of the pricing of these things, it does affect the coverage, I would push back on that and say that I don't think that's the case. So if it's not a pricing problem, because again, the 2021 revision for a couple years there was $2,000 starting, so it was a decent chunk more. If it's not a price concern that no one's talking about the pros, then what is it, right? And I think part of it has to do with the fact that the Pro line, and the kind of crux of the video is that what is Apple doing with the MacBook Pros? Because for a while, the MacBook Pros, when I bought mine in 2019 and 2018, was, what was the idea? It was that you were going to buy this if you want to have a serious laptop that competes with the Dell XPS and the Razer Blades and the Lenovo X1s, right? That was the idea. Then moves on to 2020, you replace the keyboard, it has a functional keyboard, it fixes a lot of the issues that the previous models had, and again, reiterates its stance as one of the best of these kind of ultrabooks. 2021 goes around, and they change their tone. It's starting at $2,000, it's upgraded with an SD card slot, an HDMI, and things that are more actually the professional grade, mini LED color accurate display, right? Increased refresh rate. So these are things that are a lot more focused on actual professional use cases of the software, right? Not necessarily just people in college or whatever that want a serious laptop, but actual professionals. And then it starts to go back down in the 1600 range, where we start going back to what it was in 2019, which is just a very serious ultrabook that's competing with the previous models, right? And the reason this is interesting is because, broadly speaking, Dell for the XPS line also did this, right? So they also had like a variety of different models and things. The difference, importantly, is that Dell sold like, I don't know, it's not shown here, but Dell sold like 15 different XPS models, right? Like, look at all these are qualified as XPS. Like, and then they eventually changed it to Plus and whatever, but like all these are the XPS models, right? They had like 5 or 6 or 7 different models. And Apple only had 2, right? They had the 14 and the 16 inch, and that was it. So what it basically felt like is Apple, every single time they did this, was deciding where we want to go with the MacBook. And they decided serious laptop for, professionals or prosumers or whatever you want to call them, right? And then actual professionals that need this stuff. And then they kind of went back to this sort of like serious laptop, prosumer level, right? And that's, I think, what's kind of odd, is that this jump here with the new M5 Pro would only really be helpful for actual professionals. It's going back to the 2021 model of this is actually only a benefit for professionals. And what reiterates that even farther is the fact that, as you saw there, the MacBook Air has the M5 chip. So I think a lot of people, myself included, were like, okay, the M3 or M4 is going to be the kind of consumer level, and then the M5 and M5 Pro is going to be the professional stuff, right? That's the iPad Pro that I have that I reviewed on the channel, has that M5 stuff, and that's a $1,000 tablet, right? Only people that are professionals are going to want to do that. And then they go ahead and do this, right? They go ahead and put it in the Air. And it's like, okay, so the M5 is not just a professional grade chip. It's also going to be in things like the consumer MacBook Air. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, well then, so what's the point of the Pro, right? You go back to the Pro and it's like, well, the Pro has the M5 chip and the other thing is the M5 chip, but the Pro starts at 1600 and the MacBook here, the other one starts at 1100, right? So let's go here, 13 inch. Let's pick a color. All right, so we have 10 core, 10 core, 16 core, 10 core, 8 core, 8 core, 1200, 1100. Let's just try and get it about the same, right? So let's go here. And what I'm gonna showcase is that not only is there a less of a reason to buy the MacBook Pro, but there's almost no reason to buy the MacBook Pro if you are not an actual professional, which is something that has historically not been the case, right? Historically, other than that one time in 2021, they haven't been going for that market. They've been going for they've been going for kind of like the, college student that wants to be able to do video editing and, Logic, music and stuff like that. Okay, 16 gigs RAM, 1 terabyte. Let's see, do we have a info 10 core, 10 core, 16 core, 10 core, 10 core. Okay, so the exact same chip, right? 10 core, 10 core, 16. Exact same chip. Customization, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. We can edit that to 1 terabyte. Let's again, equal pricing. Okay, that's $1,200. That's $1,300, even though it says plus $200. That's interesting, right? $1,200, $1,300. Looks like about an extra $100, even though it says plus $200 there. Not sure what that's about. I'm not logged in, am I? Am I logged in? It's possible I'm logged in, but typically it would say education discount if I'm logged in. I don't think I'm logged in. I mean, it has like location and stuff, but I'm pretty sure I'm not logged in. So it shouldn't be giving me a discount there, but as you can see, it does appear to be only increasing it by $100. But whatever, okay, so a terabyte, 16 gigs, same processing quality. You do get a lower charger in the box, but as always, you can upgrade to the charger, so let's make that equivalent. All right, same charger, same storage, same RAM, same M5 processor, 13 inches, and this is, $1,300. We go to this one, and you get your chip, same chip, 16, 1 terabyte, 70 US, don't need Pro apps, already have them, right? Don't have a trade-in. You are looking at $1,700. And so what do you get for that $1,700, right? You get, I believe you get the MagSafe and the HDMI, and yep, HDMI, micro HDMI right there, mini HDMI right there, a MagSafe, SD card reader, and the screen, right? Compared to this. And even then, I'm not 100% sure. Like, okay, there is MagSafe. Yeah, there's 2 USB and nothing there. So you do get more ports. The screen, I'm not actually 100% sure. I think they may, because it has the notch, right? Yeah, it has the notch. So it's possible that this is also a mini LED, although I would be surprised. Regardless, you can see the price difference. That's an extra $400. What's that $400 being used for? Some extra ports and a fan, right? Because I believe this is still fanless. So that's $400 for some extra ports and some fans that are not very, helpful. So I look at this and I'm like, well, would I ever get a Pro? No, not really. I would get this. And I think everyone would get that. Like, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't get this, especially because of the price difference, unless you're getting an actual professional model, which goes back to the question of what are they doing with this device? And it feels like, unless they swap it next year and they're like, actually, no, the Pro model is a thing for everyone. We've lowered the price and we've, included the M6 or whatever. Like, it just feels very odd. Because Apple is pretty consistent usually when it comes to this stuff, right? They have a consistent, methodology. And for a while, before the Neo, it was the Air was the thing you buy for a college student or because of just anyone wanting a MacBook would get the Air. And the Pro was if you needed, video editing, photo editing, music, right, that kind of stuff, AI capabilities development. And you do that because it has had a fan, and because it just had more processing power, right? Now, when they're equalized in both storage and RAM, right? Because the other thing is, for a while, the Air had 8 gigs, and this had 16 gig standard. But now that's gone, right? Now it's 16 gig standard across the board, 512 gig storage, or 1 terabyte for SSD, so the speeds are equivalent. The screen is the same. The processing at this point is basically literally the exact same. It's like, to what capacity? Also, the fact that the 15-inch of this is $200 more and the 16-inch of this is like $1,000 more, right? Probably because it comes with the M5 Pro by default. Yep, M5 Pro by default. But it's like such small things, right? Like, there's not fundamentally a big difference between this and this other than $400 actual dollars, which is a lot to a lot of people. I can't imagine recommending a Pro to basically anyone, including people that want to do the things I had before, because as a reminder, both in the iPad video I did and in the original review, the reason I got a MacBook Pro was in 2018 on the Intel base was to do video editing and photo editing and motion graphics. That was on an i5 8th gen Intel. This M5 blows it out of the water. That's part of why when I talked about the iPad, I'm like, yeah, I can do everything I want to do here. I edited the entire MacBook, the entire iPad Pro video on that iPad. Sorry, I edited that entire iPad video on the iPad itself and had no problems with DaVinci Resolve and was able to do it fine and moved stuff around. Mouse, the trackpad was the annoying part, but that's on me. And I was able to do that all on an iPad, all on something that is actually less than this MacBook Air here. I was able to do the motion graphics, I was able to do the video editing, I was able to do the drawing I wanted to do and the note-taking and the animation work I wanted to do. All of it I could do on the iPad. And I could do it with Final Cut, or I could do it with Logic, for music stuff, or I could do it with DaVinci Resolve, or I could do it with, a bunch of other options. Like, I was not limited by the iPad, and even then, that is a less intense version of the MacBook Air here for $1,300. That's kind of what I want to get across. So, too long didn't watch, that I'm going to put at the start of the video. It does not make sense, even with the introduction of the new M5 Max and M5 Pro stuff, to get a MacBook Pro, because as I demonstrated in my previous video on the iPad Air, iPad Pro that I got with M5, I was able to do and edit and do all the motion graphics and animation and drawing and everything I needed to do for that video with an iPad running an M5 chip, which is slightly less capable than a MacBook Air and substantially less capable than a MacBook Pro. And that was like $900, $950, right? Total kit around $1,100. There is no reason to buy a MacBook Pro, and that is kind of the discussion point that I wanted to look at, is why. Because historically it had been. Historically there was a reason to buy a MacBook Pro throughout all the years, and then at some point they decided, actually, we only want to target professionals. And that's kind of where we're in now. We're like, no one's going to buy a MacBook Pro except for the people that actually want and need a MacBook Pro, and at that point, if you need it to that degree, you're going to get the Pro things, right? So that's, hopefully all that made sense. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a rant, but also hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate why that makes sense. And I think a good example of that is, again, that video that I did on the iPad review, where I was able to do that entire thing on an iPad without basically any compromise, right? And a MacBook Air is worse. A MacBook Air is better, right? The iPad is worse than what the new MacBook Air would be able to give you. So hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully you kind of liked learning about those various things. If you obviously don't keep up with a lot of this stuff, or if you were confused about what the new MacBook Air means, for the existing Pros and why they're all the same, and hopefully I was able to kind of clarify some of this stuff in that video. If you enjoy this and want to see more of these things on the channel, make sure to like, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see everyone in the next video.